Hello, my name is Fred Edora, and I'm the data manager for Part B of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act here at the South Carolina Department of Education. Let's talk about the SIP. The SIP stands for the State Systemic Improvement Plan. It's a new section of our annual performance report where we must come up with a way to help special education students improve their outcomes in South Carolina. We not only have to do it because the law says we have to, but we want to do it because we love special education students and we want to make sure that they succeed while they are with us in our education system. The SIP is a team effort, so we have invited you here because we will most likely need additional data from your area. You are an expert in an area that is important for the SIP. You can provide valuable feedback about our focus, or you are a partner that cares about special education students in this state, and we want to make sure you are part of the discussion. So I wanted to first say thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us in this important and meaningful work. The SIP framework says we have to pick a focus that we can all work on together. In order to do so, we took a look at different ways we could help our special education students. After looking at things like the data, what teachers and schools are currently doing, what is important to the agency, special education staff and partners around the state, as well as the other programs and standards currently being implemented, we wanted to focus on reading. Why reading? Good question. One of the ways that the U.S. Department of Education requires us to select our focus is by looking at the data. What data do we have that is available that would lead us to focus on reading? Let's take a look. Here are a couple facts that we have found looking at the available data. Fact number one. One of the buzzwords in education refers to the achievement gap. This term refers to the disparity in academic performance between two or more groups of students. Studies for different types of education achievement gaps show up everywhere, from gender, to socioeconomic status, to dropout rates, to the differences in zip codes between different schools. In our data analysis, we looked at the differences in scores between South Carolina's general education and special education students. In an ideal world on things like statewide reading assessments, general education and special education students should be scoring roughly around the same based on the grade level of the test. Unfortunately, this isn't the case. In South Carolina, this gap is large. Starting in the 3rd grade, the difference between special education and general education students on our statewide reading assessments is about 46 points. By the time the student reaches 8th grade, the reading assessment gap grows to 63 points. This is what we call a performance reading gap. By focusing on reading in our SIP, we want to focus on interventions that will close this reading gap. Fact number 2. Special education students are moving through the South Carolina education system, but they are not retaining their proficiency in reading. One key fact we learned is when a special education student in South Carolina is in 3rd grade, our statewide assessments show that about 44% of them are proficient or above, which puts us at a state rank of about 23rd in the country. As a South Carolina special education student moves through our schools, this proficiency percentage does not remain this high. In fact, the proficiency slowly declines as they move through middle school and into high school. By the time they reach high school, that percentage drops to 12%, dropping us to 46th in the country. We want to focus on reading not only to help the special education student be proficient in reading, but to stay proficient through high school and beyond. Fact number 3. When looking at the performance of special education students across the state on statewide reading assessments, there are two distinct groups of school districts. One group are school districts with low reading performance overall, meaning both general education and special education students do poorly on reading assessments within those districts. The other group is school districts that have the highest performance gaps between general education and special education students. When looking at these two groups closely, we notice some distinctive characteristics about each of these groups. In the group of districts with the lowest performance overall, they were in some of the smallest and most rural areas of the state, averaging less than 500 students per district. Their poverty indexes were very high, and the scores of general education students were lower than the statewide average for their statewide reading assessments. In contrast, the top districts with the highest performance gap were in more urban and much larger districts, averaging over 2,600 students per district. They had lower poverty index ratings, and their general education students did far better than the statewide average on the statewide reading assessments. One key point to remember: all special education students would find any help certainly invaluable. However, as we all know, there is limited time and resources to do just about anything these days. So we believe it would be prudent to focus on a certain number of districts where we can implement the appropriate interventions while balancing which areas need the most change. With that being said, the districts that average the lowest on these reading assessments will definitely need a significant amount of help, but these same districts may also need help in ways that is outside of the scope of time and resources available within the ESSEP. On the other hand, the districts that have the highest performance gaps also have general education students that perform very well in reading assessments. How can this performance be transferred to the special education students in the same districts, and ultimately to other districts in the state? Here are some questions I pose to you for discussion. With reading being our focus, and based on what you've heard in this video and your other discussion today, is there a certain area of reading that can be measured that would be helpful for this work? And how should we select the districts that participate in this plan? Should we pick the districts that have the lowest reading assessments overall? Should we pick the districts that have the highest performance gap? Or should we have a mix of both? Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions for me or anything about the ESSEP, please feel free to contact me or anyone on the ESSEP team.